It is the big interview that is being talked about in Washington and on Wall Street. Senator Elizabeth Warren sitting down with our Jim Cramer on Mad Money, talking about her bold plan to make CEOs and companies more accountable to employees and why she thinks we need action now.
You know, we built in America a great middle class, and we did it on the backs of hardworking people who came together, mostly through their unions, to be able to say, this is a country whose rules give everybody a chance. That's gone off track in the past 25, 30 years in the wrong direction. We are a country increasingly where the government works just for those at the top and just leaves everyone else behind.
Senator Warren sounding some populist notes there, obviously, perhaps making a play for the same voters that President Trump gained in the Rust Belt back in 2016. Let's talk about all this. Jimmy Pethokoukis, economic policy and political analyst at American Enterprise Institute, is with us. So is Andy Green, managing director of economic policy at the Center for American Progress. Good to see you both. Thanks for joining us. Jimmy, obviously, one thing that she's going after is income inequality. That, you know, her premise is that even as corporations have prospered over the last generation here, wages have stagnated and we have this income inequality. So she wants employees to have a greater role in the say of the company, putting them on the board, for example. You don't think any of this is going to help, though. Why?
Well, listen, I don't think the market's up today because all of these investors are looking for there to be sort of these worker councils in every corporation of America. I mean, listen, the big problem with the American economy is we have not had fast enough productivity growth. That is where it begins. So what Elizabeth Warren is describing, I don't see how that results in faster productivity growth. In fact, the country that maybe most resembles the one she's looking at with these worker councils is Germany. And Germany does not have nearly the number of fast-growing, innovative companies that America has. If you look at the list of most fast-growing, innovative companies, you can't find the German company yet. That is the model she wants us, apparently, to duplicate.
All right. Apparently, we're trying music to be more dramatic during your...
It was. I always want a soundtrack. I want a score.
You handle that very well.
Yeah.
Andy, what do you think of her proposal here? I mean, is this the answer to solving the income inequality issue in this country?
I think there are a lot of things that need to be done, but this is a central aspect of it. I mean, look, before the 1980s, we had a series of things that put pressure on companies to make sure that they took care of a whole wide range of stakeholders, obviously investors, but also workers, communities, other priorities that worked for America. But since the 1980s, there was a dramatic shift known as shareholder value maximization that said the only priority was extracting as much money as possible from from companies to shareholders. And given the fact that the top 10%, 84% of shares are held by the 10% wealthiest Americans, and that 50% of Americans have zero shares, suggests that that extractive approach, where $7 trillion have been extracted from America's largest public company since 1985, has not worked, has been a major driver of inequality. So there's a lot more that needs to be done.
Yeah, I always think it's very interesting when people describe what they believe was our economic golden age. The president and perhaps Elizabeth Warren as well, they want us to go back to, I think, the period between about 1952 and maybe like 1968, that was the golden age of the economy, that we can just reduplicate it. Perhaps Andy would like to go back to 1980 when American companies were fat, they were getting whooped by their overseas competitors, and there needed to be a change, and there was.
Jimmy,
I don't get the nostalgia.
Funny you should bring that up, because Jim Cramer asked Elizabeth Warren about that very issue last night, and here's what she said.
A lot of people feel you're just this left-wing firebrand. Isn't what you described the way this country was in 1980?
Yeah. I mean, that's really the point. I believe in markets. I believe in all of the wealth that markets produce. But markets have to have rules. And together, we decide those rules.
Emphasis on the word we, I guess, Jim.
Fascinating that the companies that seem to be doing what she wants them to do, which they want to invest more, invest in innovation, research, pay their employees well, are these big technology companies, which Progressive also want to dismantle, heavily regulate. So if you do the things they want you to do, they want to break you up. If you don't do those things, they want to regulate you. I don't see how successful companies can win under that kind of scenario.
Andy, it feels like the ultimate message from Elizabeth Warren and a lot of folks of her ilk is there's one thing that's equality of opportunity, But it seems like you're all pressing for equality of outcome. Is that ever going to be possible?
I think we're looking for a level playing field here. If we look at the chart of
That's
wages
equality
versus
of opportunity. What about equality of outcome? Governor
Absolutely.
Cuomo last night was pushing for equality of outcome. Everybody ends up the same. Is that what you're looking for?
Not at all. I think that Senator Warren said it very clearly. We're looking at corporations and markets to do what they do best, which is compete. We want an open and competitive economy. We want one where wages are going up. And my colleague here, Jim, makes a good point that productivity is a key aspect of economic growth and job creation. But if you look at the studies, productivity growth is much stronger when you have wages really growing. And since the 1980s, the gap between wages and productivity growth has been extraordinary. And that gap has really gone to the wealth of those at the very top.
Should that be our standard?
Millions of Americans have seen wages collapse and jobs move overseas.
Listen, I don't want to be. Is there any company she likes other than Patagonia? Is that the only company that's working? Because that's about all I hear.